Hey crew, this morning had the question about a seller's net sheet. How do we show the seller what are the proceeds they're going to get walking away from a transaction? And there is a GAR form that's out there that can be used, and I'm going to show that to you really quick, just so you know that it's there and what it looks like. But also don't want you using it. So this is the seller's net sheet, and you'll see it walks you through the seller, their address, their phone number. But then we've got all this information to fill in. Their mortgage, their failure to pay penalty, penalty prepayment, their accrued interest, their second mortgage, seller's contributions, unpaid taxes, prorated to the day. There is just a whole bunch of detail on here. And generally speaking, the seller doesn't want this sort of detail. They don't need this sort of detail. And it's not really helpful because depending on the time of the month that we close, depending on the time of the year that we close, these numbers are going to change. And if I walk a seller through this sort of detail and I get down here, and even though it says estimate, if this says that they're going to walk away with $123,792.42, what are they expecting? You know, when I've gone through that much detail, they're going to be expecting to walk away with exactly that dollar figure. How often are we going to be accurate? It's going to be really close to 0% of the time. So I don't want to use that strategy in working with them. And a practice that I found really helpful and has always been sufficient for my client is I don't want to use a pre-printed form. I want to do chicken scratch on the back of a sheet of paper and walk them through to give them a general idea. Because for most clients, what they want to know is, am I walking away with a big check, a medium-sized check, a small check, or am I going to have to write a check when I sell my house? And we can do that very easily with just a pen and paper in the back of a sheet of paper. And I want to walk you guys through what that potentially looks like. So here I'm going to come in and I'm just going to say, and I apologize for my handwriting on here. Here's my sales price. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put whatever my total amount is. We're estimating that we're going to sell the house for $400,000. Okay. Well, what's our biggest expense that's going to come out of the sale of that property? Well, for most sellers, it's going to be our commissions. And on a $400,000 property, our commission is going to be $24,000. Right? What's our next biggest expense that's going to come out of that? Well, there's the possibility we're going to have sellers' contributions to closing. Okay, the seller is going to help the buyer with some of their closing costs. Now, recently, that number has typically been 0, right? But we're starting to see sellers helping buyers again in the marketplace. And there was a time a couple of years ago where I would have told you expect this to be around 3%. But this is completely negotiable. Okay. And so estimate what do we think is probably reasonable? And the best way to figure out what is reasonable is look at what other sellers have been doing. When you go look at your comps for the property, you're going to see what other sellers have been giving to the buyers. And in this neighborhood, it may be still 0. In this neighborhood, it may be on average 5,000. Okay. But if we want to just be conservative and have a good number in there, go ahead and use 2% right now. And so say the buyer may be asking for some help. And so probably 2% is a really safe figure for us to calculate on that. Okay. It's unlikely to be higher than that, and most likely it's going to be smaller than that. Okay. Then what else is going to come out of that? Well, we have the miscellaneous fees that we have to pay, our filing cost, our mailing cost, our attorney's cost. We also have our prepaids for our taxes, our HOA, and generally speaking, we can figure this is going to be 1 to 1.5%. Okay. So we can come in here and maybe estimate this on this one to be $5,000. The later in the year that it is, okay, that number is going to be higher. So let's say that we're having a closing right now. It's August. The tax bills have not been released and have to be collected yet. Okay. Once it gets to be October, November, they're going to have to pay the taxes at the closing table, even if they've already set the money aside. Okay. But for right now, we're just going to, the new owner, if we were to close today, is who's going to pay the taxes at the end of the year, but we've got to pay them for January through August. Okay. If we're selling a house in February, we're only having to pay January and February. So that's a big factor in how big this number is. Okay, is that time of the year. But 5,000, unless we're in a real high tax area, that's probably a good figure. And that's it. Okay, so typically we're figuring 6% here, 3% here, 1% here. Historically, that's the reason it's always said that it costs you about 10% of the value of the home to sell it. We're probably a little bit under that right now. Typically, it's probably taking about 8%, not 10% to sell a home, maybe 9%. Okay, but add this up, we've got 32,000, 37,000, so 363 would be our gross. Okay, and the reason I say gross, or we can call this a subtitle or subtotal, we have potentially one other big thing that's going to come out of this, and that's going to be our first mortgage and any liens that we have. Okay, so mortgage and liens, and they're going to have to give that figure to you. Okay, the reason I put mortgage and liens is I want to remind the seller that if they've got any other liens out there, tax liens, HOA liens, contractor liens, those are going to have to be taken care of when they sell the property. But if the seller tells you that they owe $280 left on their mortgage and they don't have any other liens, I'm going to write this in here, and then I'm going to have their net. I'm just going to subtract that. So this seller would be walking away with $83,000. Now, if it winds up being 79, are they going to be upset with me? No. If it winds up being 86, are they going to be upset with me? No. Because this is just chicken scratch on the back of a piece of paper. This was just designed to get them in the ballpark. And this is sufficient to satisfy 99% of your sellers. And it's really outside of our ability to get any closer than this figure without knowing the closing date that we're actually going to have, without knowing the actual sales price, without knowing the seller's contributions to closing. Getting in the ballpark is the best we can do. And this is my way of handling that. So I hope you find this helpful, and call me with any questions, or if you want to walk through this on a particular example. Have an awesome day.